Hi, this is NX from the Candid Frame. Well, as part of the expansion of what we've been doing with the podcast, I'm going to be doing more with our YouTube channel. It's going to be a variety of different things. Previously, we did a Google Plus Hangout where we discussed the topic of the ethics of photographing the homeless. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, I suggest you check it out. It was a really thoughtful conversation amongst the various photographers that chose to join me that day. And we're certainly going to be doing more of those, but I also wanted to do some different things to take advantage of the wealth of imagery that has been uploaded to the Candid Frame fan page on Flickr. We've had it for a while, but I've not really leveraged it for much. I've done it on occasion, but not consistently. And well, that's going to change. And one of the things I thought I'd do today is just talk about some of the images that I really like that have been uploaded into the pool. I periodically go in there and comment about different photographs, but I thought it might be a good idea to just share some thoughts about the images that I see in the pool that I really like and what it is I like about them. So I just went through and I browsed through the pool of images that we have here, and I picked several different photographs, and I'm just going to click through on each one and just tell you what I like about it. Maybe you'll learn something, maybe we won't. Maybe you'll just figure out that a little bit about what my tastes are, but let's see what happens. Well, the first image here is by Gary Radler. He took this at a football game, not American football, but it looks like what everyone else knows as football around the world. And when I saw this image, what really struck me was the enthusiasm and the expression of this guy in contrast to everyone else that's in the stadium. I recently went to a couple of Dodgers games this season, and there's a lot of energy and emotion that happens during a game, but I realized that a lot of the times the stuff that's happening in the crowds isn't usually captured, largely because everybody's so focused on the game. And I thought it was just wonderful that you caught, or Gary here caught this wonderful moment with these guys, this guy's outstretched arms, his expression, and how everyone else seems to be completely oblivious to him at the moment. I think it's just a great contrasting element. And the way he effectively uses the entire frame. I love the curve of the stadium and how it just creates this wonderful dynamic. And the outline of his arms and his head against the blurred background really worked beautifully in this case. It's probably an image that could work just as well as a black and white and color, but I kind of like the color here. It's a fun image, and it's a great capture. Now, this image is by Eric Stable, and he has a series of images of his dog Gunner that he's uploaded, but this is one of my favorites. The dog is just one of those dogs that you just love to photograph. His fur is in the gray that he has on it. It's just great fodder for great photography, whether it's in black and white and color. And if you go to the Flickr page and you follow him, you'll see a bunch of different fun images that he has of his dog. But this image I just fell in love with. The dog's expression is just great, and I love how the snow that's flaking off of his face and his chin is just beautiful. But the composition is just what kills me about this photograph. Here you have the dog like in the very center of the frame, which is something that most people would say you don't want to do. That you always kind of want to follow the rule of thirds. But I think in this case, the image just works perfectly by having him right there in the center. And part of it is that the snow, this path here, perfectly frames him and creates this great contrast between the shape of the dog's body and head and ears. And you get this wonderful resonance as a result of it. And then you have these sort of this shrubbery that's covered in snow that's sort of narrowing the path, and it leads us to this dog that's up here in the upper left, which serves as a great counterpoint to this dog here. I think the shot would still be good if it didn't have that dog, but having that dog there, having that secondary presence in the shot, I think really, really makes the shot for me. It's just a beautiful, beautiful black and white, and it's a beautiful portrait of a dog. I have two dogs of my own, and I wish I in my life had made as good a photograph as he's done here. He's a lot to be proud of with this photograph. This is a shot by Andrew Mangum, and this is a shot that reminds me that I need to shoot more at night. When you're shooting at night in an urban environment, the artificial light sources create this very interesting variations of color. You have fluorescence, you have tungsten, you have these FLD lights, you have all these different light types that create very different colors. And then when you have signage, it takes it all into a completely different level. And that sort of unpredictable nature of that light is what really kind of makes it interesting. It seems like inside of this restaurant that it looks like it was probably for fluorescence, and the light was corrected for that, which is a good move. But I like the fact that this is an image that has just great color, a great quality of light, and I like being able to see the figures in this restaurant and seeing how busy it is and how much energy seems to be in this small little space in the middle of the night. But it's this figure here that's at the door that really makes the shot for me. I'm always looking for that one telling element or gesture that really makes the shot. Because if you imagine this photograph without that figure there, you would just have the storefront, and you'd have that color, you get the signage, you get all this wonderful stuff. But it's that figure that serves as our introduction into the space inside. Without him, the shot would still be good, but it makes the shot for me. Looking at a scene like this, though, I'd be eager to get inside, because it seems like this place is as interesting inside as it is outside. I know some people don't feel comfortable about moving into a space like that, but if you have such an opportunity, it seems like you lose a lot if you don't walk in there and take advantage of it. There's so much going on that people's attention is not going to be too much on a photographer snapping pictures in there. I think they're way too hungry to be concerned about you snapping away. Here's his photograph by Justin Olivier. I hope I said that right. This was shot with a Polaroid land camera, so it's not digital. It was scanned in there, and the simplicity of the shot is just gorgeous. I like how it's very moody, it's very clean, but what struck me about the shot is that it is sort of the antithesis of what we currently perceive as a good black and white, which is usually very high contrast, real black blacks, real white whites, clarity pumped up to the nines. And this is a very sort of almost painterly rendering of the scene. And I really like the feel of it. I can imagine myself on that path walking up to this house on this cloudy, what feels like would be a very cold day. And it's an image that reminds me that there's not just one way to interpret black and white. I know that a lot of what we see is pretty uniform nowadays, but if you take a look at a lot of the classic photography, particularly black and white photography, there have been so many different ways that photographers have interpreted the tonality in black and white that there's no really hard and fast rule that they adhere to, nor is one that we should adhere to today. I think if this feels right to you, you need to stick to your guns and really embrace it. And I love the shot the way it is. I think if it had followed the tenets of what's supposed to make a good black and white image today, then it would be a very different photograph. It would feel completely different. And I like the fact that the choices he made here provided a very lovely, moody, and engaging black and white image. This shot I just love in terms of composition. This is just great. I kind of envy the photographer for being able to capture this moment. It's two construction workers carrying this beam, and this beam creates this incredibly strong diagonal line that actually moves you into the frame from the left and towards the two figures there. And it's just fantastic. I like the fact that the photographer is so close to these subjects. I don't know what kind of lens it sounds like. It looks like it may have been like maybe a 35 or a 50. Let's see if we have any information here that we can pull up. Yeah, it's a 38 millimeter, but on the camera you're using the D90, it's more like the equivalent of around a 50 millimeter focal length. So it's a great use of that focal length because you have that very limited depth of field. You have the sharpness, which you nailed on the guy in the foreground. In the background is really nicely blurred. I think that limited depth of field really works to your advantage here. But what could have easily ruined the shot was losing this guy's expression here. If that had been obscured by the hand or the beam, the shot would not have been as interesting. That look of exhaustion or intense focus on his face is really the heart of the image for me. But I love just all these sort of like triangles or diagonal lines. You have this arm here, you have this guy's arm here, you have that implied here. It's all about line. It's a very graphic image is what it is. It's a great street shot, but it's also very graphic, and you have these lines here, these horizontal, these vertical lines being repeated not only against the wall but in the background. And actually, when I take a look at it, you have these strong vertical and horizontal lines, and then here you have this very strong diagonal line, which serves as a real contrasting point, which I think is one of the reasons I really like the photograph and why it resonates so much for me. But this is a great capture. Now, this shot I like because it's layered. It's something that I strive for in a lot of my imagery currently, and that's building a shot where I don't have just a static one-dimensional subject like a person against a wall that's pretty flat. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make photographs where you have different planes in the shot. And here you have several different planes. You have the figure in the foreground with cleaning his eye. You have the woman here taking a photograph. Then you have this figure in the background at an ATM. And when you take a look at it, you have different layers, all that are sort of coming together for the shot. So when I take a look at an image like this, it reminds me about, man, I really want to strive to be able to create images that are this complex and really layered. And you don't come to these kinds of images by chance. Most times you kind of find a setting, and then you sort of bring all the elements, and then you just wait. So in this case, the photographer may have seen this figure here and then this figure in the distance there, and without this guy in the foreground, the shot just wouldn't have worked. It just would have fallen apart. But then you have this figure coming into the frame, and it somehow completes the shot. And it doesn't really matter that he's out of focus. I like the fact that he's kind of blurred because it renders the rest of the subjects nice and sharp. It would have been great if we'd had a subject here like sort of walking towards the frame in some way, rather than having this person sort of facing out of the frame. Having someone here sort of looking or moving into this direction would have strengthened the image a little bit. But overall, I love the fact that the photographer saw this moment and was able to see it, because it's something that it really excites me when I see it. It's not easy to get. It takes a lot of practice to start seeing this way, but when it works, it really, really pays off. This is the photographer Noah Stevens, who I've actually interviewed for the show. He's been working on a project photographing people in Detroit. And he works pretty simply. I think at the time, and maybe still, he was working with a Canon 5D Mark II with a 51.4 or 51.2. And I just love how he just leverages that very simple kit. He's normally working with a fairly wide aperture to minimize the depth of field and blur the background. But his choice of subjects are just remarkable, and he finds them everywhere. It seems to be that he found this subject in a supermarket. And I just love the light on her face, the look, the expression. It just works for me. And the blurred background, the blurred background is nice point of contrast, but I also like how these lines, these diagonal lines and these horizontal lines here help to lead us to the center of the frame and to her face. And the lighting in supermarkets aren't really, they don't exist for the benefit of photographers. So I know it can be tricky because they have lighting that is supposed to be to accentuate the products that they have there, not necessarily for making it portraits. But I think Noah here does an excellent job here. And if you haven't checked out his work, you certainly should. It's amazing how beautiful and consistent his work is over the last couple of years, and how simply he works. He doesn't need a lot of gear to make a remarkable body of work. This was really interesting. It reminds me in terms of what I was saying about the landscape image earlier, where the photographer here isn't using high contrast. He's not establishing black blacks or white whites. He's really using sort of the middle tones with a whole lot of grain in order to create a very moody image. He's using a D600 here. And he was using a very high ISO, 2500. He was shooting it wide open at 1.8. So I suspect that with that camera, the original color file that he had was probably pretty noisy, which may have inspired him to switch over to black and white. But even if that was the case, the fact that he's rendering it with primarily the middle tones and really accentuating that grain makes for a wonderful shot. We don't see his eyes. We lose some detail in his arm and in the background. But for me, I love this shot. It's a great creative choice. And again, it's about a photographer making an image that speaks more to how he felt about the moment and the subject, rather than feeling like they have to adhere to some specific tenet of what makes or doesn't make a good photograph. With all the tools that we have, I think it's important to take them and feel free to interpret it whatever way we feel is appropriate. Sometimes it may succeed gloriously, and sometimes it'll fail miserably. But I think you limit yourself if you're constantly thinking about whether or not someone else is going to accept this as real photography, quote unquote. And that photographer, let's see, Justin Olivier again. So two of his images. So that's kind of interesting. Here's another photographer, Doug Chinnery. This is just a beautiful, beautiful scene. And it's a scene, again, where the main subject, the stand of trees in this middle of this field, are in the middle of the frame. But it works. Sometimes people get locked into adhering to this idea that you always have to put things put subject matter using the rule of thirds. And sometimes putting your subject matter in the center makes the most sense. And it does here. And I love that the contrast that's created by that dark stand of trees against the gray of the sky and the background and the surrounding areas of grass. It's just a beautiful, beautiful image. And again, it's not going for that high contrast, high clarity, high sharpening look that is so common nowadays. It's a very moody, gray sort of scene, but it has a very interesting feel to it. There's probably some vignetting applied along the corner of the frames to help hold our attention, and some dodging and burning, but that's the extent of it. Any sort of photoshopping that he's done is not obvious, and it doesn't call attention to itself. So I get to experience the imagery and the scene in a particular way. I know that we have a lot of tools with Photoshop, with Lightroom, with Nik color effects, Pro filters, Topaz filters, so on and so forth. But I think that a lot of imagery calls too much attention to the technique and loses sight of the context of what the images should be about. And I'm trying to have a pretty subtle hand when I apply those filters. I don't want to call attention to the fact that I'm using them all the time. Now, this shot by Lazy Dog, I'm not even going to try to pronounce their name, but this is just a great shot. Those two people wearing those sunglasses, looking in the same direction. It's a great storytelling image. It's just wonderful. I'm wondering what they're looking at, And I like the fact that the street is fairly empty and there are very few distracting elements in the background. I immediately want to take a look at, at what they're looking at and take a look at their faces. If I enlarge the image, I might see more in the reflection in their glasses. And what's kind of interesting that I just picked up on here is both her shirt and the bag contain faces. And with the bag right below the young boy's left shoulder seems to be skulls. But there's a sort of repetition of faces that are happening throughout the shot. And again, here's this thing that's happening with the background, this diagonal line, which is sort of leading us to these subjects. And you have this sort of perspective as we move around further and further out the frame. And it just works a lot. I tend to like very graphic images, even when they're photographs of people. And I think it's important always to sort of consider not just the subjects you're photographing, but always consider what's happening with the surroundings, what's happening with the background, and how it's serving or not serving your subject, because that can oftentimes lead you to make very different choices, not just in terms of how you compose the shot, but from what position you choose to shoot from. If this photographer had been parallel to them and had this background just served as a plain blank background in the back, I don't think the shot would have been as effective. And here it's a really strong shot. Now this is a photograph where I'm just so jealous of him finding the subject. This is Nasir Hamid, also known as Boznaz, and this is another film image using a Graphics Super D. So he's working with a larger format negative than 35 millimeters. So that really gives you a distinctive look, especially with the blurred background. And the color that's produced by the film and the way it renders the skin tone, the foliage in the back and the sky, is just quite striking. But this is a subject that's just awesome. I'm always looking for characters in my shots, in my subjects, so I can make for my shots. I want people who I just immediately gravitate to and have an energy about them. And this fellow certainly has. Just his body language, his physique, his expression, all of that just conveys so much in a very, very simple shot. And I think that what really helps this is just the point of view shooting at. He's about at the subject's waist level. So rather than just being at the eye level, and that creates a sense of really strength and power in the subject, which he obviously possesses very naturally. So just the choice to move the camera down just a bit makes a huge difference in the effectiveness of this photograph. I hope I'm so lucky to find subjects like this when I'm out on the street. It's when you find these subjects like that, it's just like manna from heaven. And that's it. So I'll do this every once in a while, and I'll look through the pictures here and just share my thoughts on them. And I may do some other variations on this. We're doing listener profiles now in the Candid Frame, and every Tuesday you'll see postings at thecandidframe.com, and there you'll see a portfolio of the photographers, as well as some questions that they replied to that I've sent them. But if you're interested in being profiled, I'll have a lot in the backlog already, but just start submitting images here to the Flickr page. And I'm choosing a lot of people based on what I'm finding here. But you can also email me at info@thecandidframe.com if you want me to look at a select number of usually about 10 images that you can put together in a small gallery that I can take a look at. I'm not going to be able to respond to everybody immediately. I just have a lot of stuff to do, not only in terms of the show, but all the other work that I'm doing. But if I'm interested in the work and I have some time, I'll give you a shout out and let you know about the possibility of being showcased on the Candid Frame. So, till next time, this is Body and X, and this is the Candid Frame.